Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applied those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list.
We all want to see around corners because timing is everything. And that's why we brought Ben Edwards from CMap to the leaders list. Their platform is like a crystal ball, looking at hard data and real-time insights gathered from thousands of consulting firms around the world. And they're seeing some very clear signals, and we're going to cover all of them, like what's happening to utilization rates right now, how boutiques are winning against the big boys, and the impact of AI on middle management, and how this very well could be the golden era for boutique consulting firms. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
All right, Ben Edwards, thank you for joining the leaders list.
Absolutely delighted to be here. It's like I've just turned up and we haven't had any conversation beforehand. What's your editor going to say?
It's amazing, right?
Right.
This is fresh. We're rolling.
Yeah,
we did just get done. Although for everybody else, we did just get done talking art and shaving and why I look like I walked into a weed eater.
Which is what we're all here for, rather than you and me talking about professional services. We should just do an hour on how you're going to get a $sign into your facial hair. I think that would be exciting for everyone.
We're all here because we want to hear from you, Ben Edwards. So we're thrilled to have you, the head of sales and partnerships for CMap, and also, of course, the celebrated host of the Consulting Pulse.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah,
you are very famous for us, but we've known each other for a while just because of the professional services that we work in, the consulting arena. We've implemented CMap with some of our clients, and it's really kind of one of those things when you bring all of that data together, it makes a massive impact for the organization. So I want to talk about that, but I'd love to start with you specifically. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up in CMap and what it's like to be the head of partnerships for an organization like that.
Yeah, so the role means I get to work both sides of the Atlantic, but primarily in North America, even though I've not got the accent for it, with hundreds of boutique-sized pro serve firms, lots of consultancies who are on a growth scale exit journey, part of the same membership orgs that you are, like Collective 54. So I'm front and center in that. The sales and partnerships piece is very exciting, but most of my joy and insights comes from just meeting people in the industry. You mentioned the podcast, do webinars, and it's all about just getting as much insight out of the people in the space that we're in, and then into the hands of other founders, leaders of pro serve firms, so they can go on that journey where they're building a brand, they're increasing pipeline, they're winning work, they're delivering great projects, they're making an impact in whatever niche that they're in. So the role is very commercially focused, but actually what I really enjoy and where I see value is this sort of like trying to like join up the dots of all the people I'm connected with, so that other people I'm not yet connected with, and sharing the insights and hopefully sort of like raising all ships as the opportunity floods into the market for boutique pro serve firms.
Yeah, and CMap is an operations and intelligence platform that allows. I don't know why I'm telling this. You tell everybody what it is, but it makes sense that you're thinking about insights, right? I mean, that's essentially what the platform does.
Right. Yeah, and we're a very data-centric SaaS business ourselves. So the type of insights that we get, the data that's existing in our platform, the insights that then that enables our clients to get, who are pro serve firms leveraging our software. Yeah, it's all about the data, and it's a space where actually throughout history there hasn't been a ton of data because it's people-based businesses, and unless you're tracking metrics, you're never going to really get a ton of insights. It's not like you've got a factory or an FMCG brand or product that you're then shipping and selling. This is people's time, and getting insights from that notoriously has been quite difficult. So yeah, our solution is essentially for boutique pro serve firms who want to embed more of a data rich and processes inside of their business so that they can make really good decisions on things like classic problems we'd solve are delivering great work for clients, but maybe they're eating your margin for breakfast, lunch and dinner. You've got some fantastic people, but some are massively overworked and some are on the bench. So how do you balance that out? You might be looking for investment or have already got some, or maybe looking at that growth journey and you've got some reporting requirements. That's all going to require more substantive data so that external bankers, M&A experts, private equity, if you're going for an MBO, they can make sense of what is this business. It's not just a great service and not just a great brand, but actually the metrics underneath really present a really compelling story that's investable going forwards.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because you're right. I mean, a manufacturing business has machines that output data. And so it's really simple, right? People, you have to actually go get that data. But I've always felt like CMap is that engine. It's the mechanics behind it so that you can start to see data in, data out, and what is happening in the business. So, and in doing that, let's talk a little bit about the customers for CMap, just so everybody that's listening, because typically our clients look like our listeners look like your clients, right?
Yeah, we've got a strong overlap, haven't we?
Yeah.
Like 700 professional services firms, the vast majority of them are between 20 and 200 billable heads, so a few $1 million in annual revenue to low tens of millions of dollars of annual revenue. They're people-based businesses that do sell time materials, fixed fee, retainer engagements, recurring revenue. We do have some businesses that are larger than that, but they tended to have actually got to that point through growing on our platform. So before you get to a huge ERP, then CMap is a really logical next step if you're moving off of spreadsheets. Like that's the point in which we exist and our solution starts to really excel for boutique pro serve firms.
Yeah, I agree. Perfect entry level platform to be able to really bring that data together. So,
Right.
all right. So, talk a little bit about the growth stage that CMap is at today. Where are you guys at, and what are you experiencing personally? What's on your leaders list?
Yeah, so we're about 140 staff. We're nearly $20 million in ARR. And there's services revenue on top because we have our own consulting team who help onboard other consultancies onto our platform. As a SaaS firm, we typically look at things like ARR, NRR, which is net revenue retention, and sort of like ACV, which is the average customer value over a period of time. So some metrics translate really well to pro serve firms, some don't. Strategically, we are focused on boutique consultancies and boutique architects and engineering firms. So ensuring that we are best in class for those two subdomains of professional services, and then underneath each of those going narrower and narrower. So under consulting, we want to make sure that we're delivering really great solutions for management strategy consultancies, technology services, data and AI, environment and sustainability. And then there's a geo piece. So we're doing very, very well in UK and Europe, and we've been pushing hard in North America. So it's continuing that expansion in the US and Canada. Those are very much front of mind for us. And for our clients, we've had a couple of years where average growth rates, both in terms of headcount and revenue, have maybe plateaued a little bit for lots of our clients. So through them, we've also got ambition to see them come back up to pushing ahead with growth. And even if that growth, it's an interesting one, because even if growth isn't headcount and revenue, we just want businesses who are sustainable, so are profitable, well run, can stand the course of time. So that's sort of like a vicarious ambition that we've got that we're focused on through our clients.
Well, hopefully that becomes the byproduct of using the platform, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we've got some really good evidence that some of the sub niches have still maintained some really solid growth, but it's not like the COVID era where most professional services firms were on some sort of like growth journey. I think with the benefit of hindsight, we can sort of look back and go, it's sort of a known fact anyway for pro-serve firms. Down markets or up markets, change is when they tend to excel. In these periods where it's a bit choppy and it's a little bit more of a plateau economically, you know, there's less of a driver. So, I mean, I don't really want us to go economically down, but some sort of changeable market.
Nobody wants that.
No, but it's where professional service firms thrive. So, some sort of like definitive direction. Where are we going? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that was actually one of my questions is, you know, when you take a look at, so 700 different companies and really squarely in that SMB space where they're going to go through professional services firms with, you know, people-based businesses. They are wildly different businesses at various headcounts and growth stages. And so I have two different paths we can take. This is a choose your own adventure. So we can talk more about specific growth stages and where you see data relevance in CMap and how companies are different at different stages. Or you can also just start right in on what do you see in the market and what's happening right now, because it is a really interesting market. I know, like, you've done some stuff on, you know, is consulting dead, and you know, what's AI doing to consulting. So I think there's a whole bunch to talk about, but I'll just give you a prelim. Those are two options.
Okay, so let's get, so the first part that you asked about was, are there any specific stages that we've seen firms go through growth challenges or opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
So some people in the market talk about S-curves. There's others that look at sort of like more definitive markers, whether that be a headcount or a revenue. And broadly speaking, we see that when a firm gets to around a couple of $1 million in revenue and you're into the low tens of staff, there definitely is some sort of initial pivoting point, because you've gone from 1, 2, 3 founders doing anything and everything on the typical consulting triangle of like pitching for work, winning for work, delivering work. And you've now expanded out and you're at the nucleus of like starting an actual professional outfit at this point, and you've got to scale beyond the founder bottleneck, which is widely talked and the concept talked about as well. So that's a definite stage where we find that firms either creak and go past that, or hit a ceiling and like have to revert back. So quite often we do see businesses break through that ceiling by virtue of the fact that they realize that they need to get their operations in order. They start understanding which of their clients not just present really great top line revenue opportunities, but are also profitable. They understand which of their people are working really effectively, highly utilized, and they can improve their cash flows by getting the bills out the door quicker, so they don't face that crunch that can come about at the earliest stages. Once they do get through that phase, the next stage is like a maturation journey. And really this is about like adopting some better best practice principles about running the firm. And it's like better HR principles, better accounting principles. So in North America, that's moving from cash-based to accruals with GAAP accounting, revenue recognition, more KPIs and accountability, more understanding of where time is going, not just spent on billable work, but non-billable work. So the effort that's gone into things like business development and networking, like personal development, IP and IC documentation, which comes into effect and can be powerful when maybe an investor is looking to get on board and is looking for something more tangible in the firm. So that phase can be wide and broad, because some firms can get investment when there are just a few $1 million in revenue, and other firms it can be tens of millions, and they, instead of going for investment, they have an exit. Other firms might just get somewhere in the mid-range, but it's a business they want to sustain and outlive them, so they pass it on to the next generation. So that's the next big pivot point, I think. And then beyond that, go on.
Well, and that can happen, obviously different for different industries, you know, different specific types of companies. But we tend to find like there's just something different about when you transition into a 25-person company. And you were talking about it as revenue. We find the complexity point is people, not money. And so, at 25 people, we see a tremendous amount of, either the engine starts rolling and you're really good at it, or it becomes something where you just keep banging against it and it requires, conscious effort. Then we also see that at like 75, anywhere from 50 to 75 is usually one of those people points that are really hard. And then 150 plus that's an entirely different business. Do you have, like, you've already given a window into some of the things that people work on, but do you actually see that in the system? Can you see what projects and what initiatives they are taking on that, gets them through that next ceiling?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the firms that start leveraging the project-based insights are the ones that typically will go from X to Y the quickest. So they will be understanding what was in the scope of work, the SOW, what's being delivered, how much time is getting tracked against that project, and then on an engagement level, understanding whether the margin that it's getting delivered at compared to the margin that it was sold at is in line or better. Honestly,
so that's like operating in the business, right?
Yeah,
making sure that the metrics related to the specific projects are clear, everybody understands it, they know the margin on the work.
Right.
That's that piece, right?
That's one of the biggest indicators of like whether the firm's going to be on a growth trajectory or not, whether they've got to grips with that. And it's not necessarily just actually what that margin means, although very important, because better margin will mean that you've got more opportunity to reinvest and hire great people, maybe take a hit on some work that is more strategically important. It just shows really good operational discipline, and because it's combining lots of different data points in one place, it shows that they've mastered that. They've understood their pricing, and they have understood some historicals. They are tracking time. They're running engagements properly. There's a number of things that just culminate in that one piece of insight that's a really good demonstration for firms.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's foundational, right? When you understand the specific projects, the work you're doing, and how each one of those is a microcosm of the business, then I always refer to that in the operating category.
Right.
The next one that we see tends to be around leadership. And I think you alluded to that earlier, where all of a sudden it's not just the individual who's, the leader, and it's not that founder's bottleneck, but it's I start identifying true professionals. I bring them in, and my metrics are related to how am I leading.
Right.
That's
how much time are you spending on yourself and on the business, rather than actually having to do 90% client work, being large. Lots of leaders still love that being involved in the business. I completely get it, but you do need to have time that you spend working on more of the strategic things. And actually, we've got some data that we've seen that intimates that over the past 3 years, execs are spending less time on that. That's an area they enjoy the most, but they just haven't got the time to get around to doing it. So that's something that I think is really interesting. Like, if you are listening to this, like, to reflect on, like, are you falling into that same trap as we statistically are seeing is happening across a number of different firms? And how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that space? And what's really interesting as well is when I speak more sort of like qualitatively with the rung below the execs, over the period of time that I've been working with professional service firms, let's say the past 3 or 4 years, and I have hundreds of meets every year with these types of people, is they don't feel like they're trusted as much, and they've not got as much empowerment, and they are not capable of delivering as much because of like the structure and the hierarchy they're operating. So there's this real disconnect between leaders want to spend more time in the business, but doing less of it and having less time to do so. The rung below wanting more trust, but not getting it. We might have reached an inflection point there, I would hope. And it's all about then downward communication, isn't it? Making sure that there's transparency. what's the vision of the business, who's going to deliver this and take this forwards. I would love it if we could capture all of that inside of CMap, that sort of like more qualitative insight. But there's some quantitative stuff that just is demonstrating that that's a challenge for boutiques at this moment in time.
So let me just make sure I understand that, because we always refer to that as, are we working on the business or in the business, right? If the on the business initiatives are the ones that are, I'm going to take on this project and it's going to enable everybody else to be more effective. The in the business is I'm working with clients, I'm doing billable work. And frankly, it's kind of interesting because we have a lot of data that shows when CEOs stop doing that or they stop working in the business too soon.
Right.
Because they go, oh, I got to get out of this and somebody else can do it. They do a lousy job of bridging.
Right.
Oftentimes they just go, I'm done. Right. So, the in the business, they still have to be that person until they have built the foundational bridge to let those other people take ownership.
Yeah.
So when you're saying that they're not doing as much are you saying that they're not doing as much in the business and they want to, or was it the opposite?
So we're seeing that leaders and founders of boutique pro serve firms are spending more time in the business on billable client work, whilst their team, everybody below them, is spending less time on billable work and in the business. We understand that those same leaders and founders love to spend more time on the business, but conversely spending less time on the business. The people below would love to be taking more of the opportunities that exist inside of their firm to drive it forwards along with the founder's vision, but are getting less entrusted to do so.
I'm going to go ahead and point out that we have not paid you as a sponsor for Proxy, but I do want to thank you for that. Because, but that is the universal challenge, right? I mean, you are naturally drawn into the business, and that happens, but you cannot let go of those big initiatives that are what allow you to blow past that next growth stage. And so that's what we've always found with Proxy is like, if you have to, it becomes a role. You have to have somebody committed to staying doggedly on those projects and getting those done so that way, when you can look up again, you can roll right into it and start leveraging.
Now, I'm not going to profess to being a master of professional services because I've never run a firm myself. But I am absolutely entrenched in as much qualitative and quantitative as I can get my hands on. And my read after the 10,000 hours that I've spent looking at that is somewhere between 40 and 60% billable utilization for a senior person. Feels innately like you get that really nice balance of still being able to work with some great clients, being the face of the business, ensuring there's an adequate handover between the next gen and yourself on those engagements, but also freeing up yourself to work more on the business, which is where most of them want to be spending their time. So actually, there is at least one metric that you could probably look at every week or every month, every quarter at the very least, to get a sense of am I actually doing that? I think that would be a really logical place to start. And at either side of that, if you're either side of that, sure, make a judgment call. But if you're in that range, from all the conversations I've had, that feels like a really good starting point. That's
really good. That's an easy thing. Although it's amazing how many people don't really track their own time, even in professional services. They don't track their own time really, really well. And I remember, in the agency world, I got to a point where I knew my perfect balance was in thirds. If I put a third in client billable time, a third into running the business and working on the business, and then a third into business development and marketing the firm. That was when I was always that felt just about perfect.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Well, there we go. We're not too far away from that range that I go. I should have
just
given it in a more succinct third. I like that as a easy to understand concept more than my ranging between 40 and 60. So
no. Yours is actual data across multiple firms. So that's better yet. So let's go into that other question I asked about, just what do you see happening in the market? Because I do love the fact that yours is empirically driven and you're looking at data, as opposed to people who go, well, I don't know, I kind of feel like.
Right. Yeah. And also we've got this geographic lens as well. So what I would say, and most of your audience will be North American, is that market has got higher levels of optimism and slightly better performance than, let's say, the UK and Europe, which has not necessarily ground the same level of results out through the tougher times as maybe the North Americans have. I put that down to a couple of things. I think in the North American market, your clients, i.e. the people that are paying for you, your expertise, for your engagements in your work, they've got slightly bigger checks and wallets than on the other side of the Atlantic. And therefore, if you've got higher revenue engagements, almost by de facto, you will have better margins. And if you've got better margins, it should lead to more disposable cash that you can then reinvest in the business, in technology, in sales and marketing efforts. Now, obviously in the UK and Europe, we still have some massive companies and some massive spenders on professional services. Mm-hmm. But that's an interesting starting point. If we then go like down another level into the actual types of firms that are really successful versus those that are maybe just on an even keel, there's two real areas that I've seen more explosive growth. IT and technology consultancies, data and AI focused businesses, and then some businesses aligned to the explosive North American Silicon Valley SaaS vendors. And if you've got a professional services firm latched onto one of those, and if they don't have a huge internal consulting team, some of those have also done particularly well. Outside of data, AI, technology, which feels very obvious, then environment and sustainability for a period of time was doing very, very well. There was growth in revenue, growth in headcount, solid margins. There was lots of private equity sniffing around. There was plenty of mergers and acquisitions. There was plenty of deals to be had. Now, maybe it's hit a little bit of a stumbling block because of some government policy, but we can't really see whether that's going to play out too much in the future. Your more classic management and strategy consultancies, maybe in North America, that are focused on a specific sector or a specific like region or state, Midwest, California, those tend not to have had the same level of explosive growth as those other subsectors that we've seen.
Okay. And so when we start thinking about, if we're a boutique consultancy, and let's take North America, you were just talking about the fact that there's, the benefit of North America is there might be bigger checks, which of course, also opens up opportunities for failure. Like the bigger the complexity, the more room there can be for failure. But the benefit of something like CMap is I can take on those bigger projects and I can start to understand when a project goes south or if I'm not doing well with it. So I get that. But if I'm a boutique, am I now struggling to win the business against the bigger firms because there is more separation between the types of work we're doing, or are boutiques, is this going to be a golden era for boutiques?
That's a really great point. So, and not one I've dug into previously. So yeah, let's go into that. So definitely in North America, because the professional services buyer pool not only has bigger wallets, but it's also bigger in volume and value. You definitely have more competitive tension against the bigger firms. So there's more RFPs, there's more pipeline opportunities, there's more sales won by boutiques against the bigger four in North America than in UK and Europe, for sure. What does that mean? Yeah, it has meant that in North America, because the bigger firms are starting to reduce some of their rates or throw bodies onto projects, that definitely has meant there's an increased competitive tension for boutiques against the bigger firms. However, if we look at the actual growth rates and the revenues associated with those boutiques, those haven't necessarily slowed, which tells me that, or what I can infer from that, is they're still winning against them. So the big firms are coming down. They're worried. They've got huge challenges with AI and what that's going to do for their business model and how they deliver and their pricing. But boutiques, because they're fast and nimble and have got like more specific domain expertise, that's probably why they're still winning out. So I listen to lots of experts. We're both part of Collective 54. Greg Alexander is saying like this is the golden era for the boutiques.
Mm-hmm.
I think based on what we're seeing, probably right. And I guess what it's showing is if you are the boutique and you're up against some of those bigger firms, don't crumble based on price. Like don't, obviously it's competitive, so you will worry, but don't like lose your nerve if you're up, if the services buyer is saying, oh, hang on, we're also going to look at these different options. Like if you've got something truly differentiated and truly specific that you know those bigger firms can't offer, there's still an opportunity for you to go and win that engagement.
Well, I agree with that. And this is a period of change, right? I mean, when we bring AI into the services that we provide and we are able to shift very, very quickly, I mean, that is the benefit of a period of time like this. It's just like, back when the internet era, the big firms, of course, eventually they got all those big, they were awarded the big business, but there was a very long period of time where the small companies, the boutiques were coming up and they were growing and scaling faster because they could go very deep, very quickly, and they could adapt and change. And that's what I think is really interesting right now is just, when we start talking about, oh, consulting is dead because of AI, I'm actually the opposite of that. I think there is so much that is needed as we start to figure out how companies transform around AI that, this is an incredible opportunity for consultancies.
I agree. I put out things like the death of consulting because I want to be provocative and also
because you were salacious.
Yeah, and I'm copying the headlines of the FT and Bloomberg. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. The death of consulting would not be good news for me or for the business that I am in. So we are very firmly a believer that exactly it's an opportunity for the boutiques who we champion and we serve to differentiate themselves. Another interesting comparison between North America and UK Europe is when I'm doing my in-person events either side of the Atlantic, in the UK, the impact of AI on resourcing and hiring has yet to really hit. Lots of ops, HR, finance, plus the exec team in boutique professional service firms are still looking at pyramid-shaped organizations, adding junior headcount, adding midweight where people have churned out of the business. No massive change from like a resource perspective. I come to North America in some industry events, and there's already some businesses who have like done away with some headcount and are highly leveraging technology and AI, not just in their business to understand what's going on from an insights perspective, but actually for some delivery. So I think that's really interesting, and it shows just a little bit further ahead in terms of like the adoption. What I haven't fully understood yet is what that means for the buyers of the services. Like I've read the headlines where some consultancies have been called out for delivering a project largely with AI. Some of it's wrong and they've had to take some of their fees back. What I'd love to see over the short period of time, 3 to 6 months, is like, does that change the buyer of consulting services behavior? Do they start pushing for more insights from the firm as to what percentage of this is actually getting delivered by AI or tech-enabled services? Because if there's a chance for them to negotiate on price, that's one, and they will do. I don't know whether we're there yet. Have you seen that yet?
It's funny you say that because from the hiring perspective, what we did see is some companies made immediate cuts with the assumption that things were going to get better because with AI, they were going to be more efficient. I've actually seen some of those companies hire back because they're recognizing that they had a trajectory that they were believing in, and AI helped them in early stages, but then they started realizing like somebody has to drive the AI. And then there's, the execution work afterwards. So that's one of the things that I have seen in North America. But now, we just went through another wave of companies cutting, big companies cutting 10, 15,000 people. And, like that's definitely happening. And those are the companies who have been working against this for a while, and they've started to recognize, how they can find those efficiencies.
We're definitely just in a period of change. Like there's going to be some data that suggests that some things are going to be okay. I saw a Paychex report, which was different types of professional services roles and their annual salary change year on year. And the roles that you would have gut instinctively thought would be going down were actually the ones that went up, i.e. highly creative, like written and audio, visual, creative content. I'm like, hang on, that's like what everyone's using ChatGPT for. So the way that it was presented back to me was like, obviously this is average data sets. So actually it might be that the best are commanding more, but the people at the bottom are the ones that are getting cut. So
that's 100% correct, because what AI does is gives you homogenization. Eventually it is taking the same data and sharing it with multiple parties. And so then you can still use AI to get better information, but you really have to be great at being able to keep working that engine to give you something unique. But it can't come up with the very, very unique idea the same way that humans can. And coming out of the advertising industry, that's one of the things that, I think this is a great opportunity for the people who think differently.
This is where your art major is coming into its own. You didn't know this at the time. Your dad didn't know this.
Yeah.
Now you can be like, finally, I knew AI was coming all those years ago.
Yeah, exactly. When I went out to art school, and my dad kept saying, like, how do you make money at this? Now I can finally go, I cashed in a little bit. Hey, I was going to ask you about in CMap, you guys, so it is an enterprise system to be able to run the entire organization. So you do see HR, you do see sales and marketing, you do see the initiatives people are running, you see all of that stuff. Have you started to see how AI-driven initiatives or the role of AI in delivery is starting to show up in CMap? Like, are they tracking that in any way?
Yeah, not a huge amount yet, but that's definitely something that we're keeping an eye on. Obviously, in our own product, we've got AI-enabled solutions. So we're hoping that our clients will leverage our AI. Now, we can see which consultancies offer AI services to their clients. However, it's a bit like the cobbler's kids. I'm never 100% sure whether actually those same firms that are delivering AI solutions to their clients fully leverage it internally themselves.
Of course not, because that's working on the business. That is that gap that it's the execution gap, right? We see it all the time.
Right. But there's something that we'll be keeping an eye out for certain, because they're, from a project's perspective and from a resourcing perspective, I'm looking for that day that somebody has an agentic person or solution that's actually resourced onto a project rather than you or me, for instance. I'm sure it won't be too long.
No, it's look, I've already I've made this claim before, but I think, middle management in the, very near future, but middle management will look very different in the manager understands processes and really owns the customer journey that they're responsible for. And then they use agentic solutions to solve that. And so what they're essentially managing are AI agents. I think there's an entire middle management that is going to be restructured around enablement and agent management. And I do think you start to see that. I just was curious if that shows up in CMap, but it will, right? They'll plug in the agent. They'll plug in the solution, right?
Right. AI is in most conversations that I have, whether that be with a prospect looking to leverage it in the platform to get them richer data, richer insights, or it's with clients who are looking to leverage it internally in their business or for delivery. It's just going to become an even bigger focus as the months and years roll on. And the pace of the change is what blows my mind. I just can't believe how quickly it's risen to the surface. I did something with Kung Fu.ai, who you know, a couple of years ago when it was just starting to, to rear its head with the launch of ChatGPT. The progress since then has just been like frightening almost.
Yeah, we see it too. I mean, in Proxy, one of the on the business initiatives is establishing AI as a center of excellence. And how does the organization approach it? And so a lot of the work that we do, those on the business initiatives, are enabling AI. And the big challenge is a whole lot of companies are going out and saying, well, I'm going to jump into AI, and they haven't done the foundational work that makes AI really sing.
So we're similar. Obviously, in our product, we've got AI, but also in our business, we're leveraging it. And we're not really leveraging it to create more, like lots of people are, not the generative piece, but to understand what we've already got inside of our business, and then how that can level up our people to leverage it has been, we're only on the start, but already it's like fairly transformational, because the amount of data that exists across different solutions, across different teams, different bits of insight that would just get shared on like a side Teams chat or don't get captured digitally because they were done in person. If you're pulling all of that together, my word, the amount of power that's in sort of like our IPIC, and then if new starters join, or if we want to do a new campaign, or if we want to look at a certain bit of insight, we've got it there already. I feel like that's been a big lesson. Instead of just jumping straight into how do we create more with it, or how do we replace it, it's like, how do we just leverage everything that we've got? And that's like that's our version of the foundation.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why we put in things like CMap, right? I mean, because that tells you that you've laid the foundation, you've done the groundwork. Now you can start identifying those friction points. I mean, that's what CMap, I mean, it's incredible because it looks at the entire organization in a professional services firm. And so you can start to see those friction points and go, that's an automation. Or I have the wrong staff on that for this specific deliverable, or I am hiring wrong, and really this should be this type, maybe it should be an agent, but that's what starts to bubble up when you've done the foundational work and when you have the data.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right, Ben, this is the leaders list. Everybody's going to get done watching this. And of course, they've been riveted up to this point, couldn't shut off. So they've watched this entire thing. So what are they going to go and do as soon as they finish watching this? From your perspective, what should be on their leaders list?
Well, I'd love for them to connect with me on LinkedIn. So if you find, that would be a great starting point.
That's actually very fair. And we will have that in the show notes because everybody should follow Ben. He puts out great content.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one.
Right. I would use the gap between Thanksgiving and Christmas to at least spend a little bit of time to review what you achieved or didn't in 2025. Everybody will have done their 2026 planning. They'll have done their forward-looking view. What's happening? What are we going to change? What are we going to do in the future? Why don't you spend a little bit of time looking back at how you priced your engagements? Is there anything that can change there? Which clients are still bugging you, eating your margin? What services can you refine? Which of your team have done an excellent job versus those that maybe less so? If you're using 1099s, review that as well. And then more fundamental financials, just have a look, like, have you been able to drive the level of profitability and cash flow that you wanted so that you can make those investments into the future? That would probably be a good use of time in a period of time where you want to try and step back a little bit and look back.
Yeah, it gives you that opportunity for reflection. So one of the things you may find as you start to do that is I can't get my hands on the data. And if that happens, there's somebody you ought to call across the pond if you're in North America.
And if you look back and you find you've got that big initiative that you haven't been able to deliver, you can get in touch with yourselves. There we go.
There you go. There you go. All right. This has been great. Thanks so much, Ben, for giving your time to the leaders list and helping us get to that next level. So we appreciate it.
Loved it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.